The massive ships appeared on every telescope and radar screen across Earth at exactly 1447 Universal Time. They came from the direction of Jupiter, emerging from the darkness of space like mountains made of metal and light. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest vessels were the size of aircraft carriers, and the largest stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. In the United Earth Council headquarters in Geneva, alarms rang through every corridor. Military officers rushed to their stations while diplomats grabbed phones and opened emergency channels. On screens around the world, people stopped what they were doing and stared at the news broadcast showing the alien fleet hanging in space beyond the moon. The ships were beautiful in a way that made humans feel small. They were made of materials that seemed to shift colors in the light, creating patterns of silver, blue, and purple across their hulls. Energy shields shimmered around each vessel like soap bubbles made of light. Weapons ports lined their sides in neat rows, and strange symbols marked their armor plating in languages no human had ever seen. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center, her arms crossed as she watched the main display screen. She was 53 years old with gray streaking through her black hair. Her uniform was crisp and her face showed no emotion as she studied the alien formation. Around her, younger officers spoke in urgent tones, coordinating with military bases and space stations across Earth and the solar system. "How many?" she asked quietly. 347 ships confirmed, replied Commander Marcus Webb, her second in command. More could be hiding behind the formation. They're maintaining position at lunar orbit, not approaching Earth directly. "Smart," Chen said. "They want us to see them, but they're not being immediately threatening. What about our orbital defenses?" "All stations at full alert. Railgun platforms are charged and targeting solutions are locked. The moon bases have gone to combat status." "But Admiral," Webb hesitated, "our entire defense network wouldn't last 10 minutes against that fleet, not if their technology matches their size." Chen nodded slowly. She had known this day might come. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it had arrived with overwhelming force. A communications officer called out from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, in multiple languages. They're asking to speak with Earth's leadership." "Put it through," Chen ordered. The main screen shifted to show a being that was clearly not human. It stood upright like a human, but there the similarities ended. Its skin was a deep burgundy color and covered in fine scales that caught the light. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in 3-fingered hands. Its head was elongated with large golden eyes that seemed to see everything. When it spoke, the words came through speakers in perfect English, though there was a delay as translation software worked. "I am Ambassador General Thexnor of the Valorian Empire," the alien said. Its voice was deep and resonant. "We come as representatives of the greatest civilization in this sector of the galaxy. For 12,000 cycles, we have brought order to the chaos of space. 47 species now live under our protection. 200 worlds prosper under our guidance." The alien paused, letting the weight of those numbers sink in. On Earth, billions of people watched the broadcast in their homes, offices, and streets. The United Earth Council members sat in their chamber, faces pale as they listened. "We have observed your species for some time," Thexnor continued. "You have achieved basic spaceflight and rudimentary technology. You show promise, but you are still young and divided. Your people fight among themselves over resources and ideologies. This is common among primitive species. But now, you have the opportunity to join something greater than yourselves." Admiral Chen's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained silent. Around her, the command center was completely quiet as everyone listened. "We offer you a place in the Valorian Empire," the alien said. "Under our rule, Earth will be protected from the dangers of the galaxy. Your people will have access to our technology and knowledge. You will be guided toward a better future. All we ask is that you accept our sovereignty and follow our laws." The alien's golden eyes seemed to look directly through the camera. "To show you the wisdom of accepting our offer, we will demonstrate the power of the Valorian Empire. Observe." The transmission switched to an external view. One of the alien battleships, a massive vessel glowing with energy, moved forward from the formation. Weapons ports along its sides opened, revealing cannons that pulsed with blue light. The ship turned toward a large asteroid that had been drifting nearby, probably pulled into position for this exact purpose. The battleship fired. Beams of pure plasma lanced out from dozens of weapons at once, converging on the asteroid. The rock didn't just break apart, it vaporized. In 3 seconds, a mass of stone and metal that had existed for billions of years was reduced to glowing gas that dispersed into space. The heat from the blast was so intense that sensors on Earth's orbital stations registered it even from that distance. The transmission returned to Ambassador General Thexenor. "This is but a fraction of our military capability," the alien said. "Each ship in our fleet carries weapons that can reduce continents to ash. Our shields have never been breached by any weapon in known space. Our materials are stronger than anything your species has developed. We have conquered worlds with technology far more advanced than yours." The alien leaned forward slightly. "I tell you this not to frighten you, but to help you understand reality. Resistance is not bravery. It is foolishness. Submission is not weakness. It is wisdom." Thexenor straightened. "We are not without mercy. We understand that accepting such a change requires time and consideration. Therefore, we give you 30 days to make your decision. 30 days to consult with your leaders, to debate among yourselves to come to the only logical conclusion." The alien's expression hardened. "If, at the end of 30 days, Earth has not accepted our offer, we will be forced to implement pacification protocols. Your military will be eliminated. Your governments will be dissolved. Your planet will be brought into the Empire by force, and many of your people will suffer in the process. This is not what we wish, but it is what we will do, if necessary. Choose wisely," Thexenor said. "Choose peace. Choose prosperity. Choose the Valorian Empire. We will await your response." The transmission ended. For a moment, the command center was completely silent. Then everyone started talking at once. Officers shouted questions and reports. Phones rang. Alarms chimed. The normal controlled chaos of a military operation filled the room. Admiral Chen raised her hand and gradually the noise died down. "Get me a direct line to the Security Council," she said calmly. "And activate Protocol Endurance Authorization Chen Alpha 73. Commander Webb's eyes widened. "Admiral, that's—" "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Chen replied. She looked at the screen where the alien fleet still hung in space like a sword hanging over Earth's head. "They think we're primitive. They think we'll be impressed by their light show. They think we'll surrender because they have big ships and fancy weapons." A slight smile crossed her face, the first expression she had shown since the aliens arrived. "They have no idea what humanity has been preparing for all these years. They think they're the predators here. They're about to learn a very hard lesson about what happens when you corner a species that has been perfecting warfare for 10,000 years." She turned to her communications officer. "Send a message to all our hidden stations. All of them. Kuiper Belt, asteroid bases, the dark yards beyond Neptune. Tell them to begin activation sequences. I want our fleet ready to move in 72 hours. "What about the surrender ceremony?" Webb asked. "The Council will want to buy time, make it look like we're considering their offer." "Exactly," Chen said. "Let them think we're scared. Let them think we're divided and arguing among ourselves. Let them relax and assume victory is certain. Meanwhile, we prepare." She walked to the main display and zoomed in on one of the alien battleships. It was impressive, she had to admit. Powerful shields, devastating weapons, clearly built by a civilization with vast resources and advanced technology. The Valorians had probably used ships like these to conquer dozens of worlds. They had probably heard the surrender of countless species who looked at that fleet and saw certain death. But Admiral Chen saw something else. She saw ships that were designed for intimidation first and warfare second. She saw weapons built to destroy primitive defenses, not face an enemy that had prepared for exactly this scenario. She saw a fleet that was used to easy victories against frightened opponents. Most importantly, she saw a civilization that had never fought humanity. The Valorians had conquered 47 species and 200 worlds. They had 12,000 years of history and technology humans could barely imagine. They had arrived with overwhelming force and confidence. But they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humanity would react the way other species had reacted. They had assumed that humans would be impressed by their display of power. They had assumed that 30 days would be enough time for Earth to accept the inevitable. They didn't know about the secret shipyards. They didn't know about the weapons development programs hidden in the outer solar system. They didn't know that humanity had spent 5 decades preparing for exactly this moment, building a fleet designed not for glory or exploration, but for pure, efficient lethality. They didn't know that humans were the species that had taken the wolves of their world and turned them into loyal pets. They didn't know that humans were the species that had split atoms to make weapons before they used them to make energy. They didn't know that humans were the species that had spent their entire history perfecting the art of killing other humans, and had gotten very, very good at it. Admiral Chen watched the alien fleet on her display and allowed herself a small, cold smile. The Valorians thought this was over before it began. They thought they had already won. They thought humanity would look at their battleships and surrender in despair. They were about to learn that they hadn't come to conquer Earth. They had come to wake up something that had been waiting in the dark, preparing for this moment, building weapons in secret and planning strategies for battles against unknown enemies with superior technology. The Valorians thought they were predators. They were about to discover that they had just walked into the territory of something far more dangerous. They had just threatened a species of persistent hunters, pack animals, and tool users who had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being smarter, more adaptable, and far more ruthless than anything else on their planet. Earth would play along with the surrender ceremony. Earth would act frightened and divided. Earth would give the Valorians exactly what they expected to see. And while the aliens relaxed and prepared for their inevitable victory, humanity would show them what real warships looked like. Not ships built to impress or intimidate, ships built to kill. Ships built by a species that understood war not as a tool of conquest, but as a matter of survival. The Valorian Empire had won many battles and conquered many worlds. But they had never fought humanity, and that was going to make all the difference. The emergency session of the United Earth Council began 3 hours after the alien transmission ended. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in the council chamber in Geneva, their faces showing various degrees of fear, anger, and determination. Outside the building, crowds had formed. Some carried signs demanding peaceful surrender. Others called for resistance at any cost. The world had divided itself in mere hours, just as it always did when faced with a crisis. President Elena Martinez of the Pan American Union called the session to order. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. "We have all seen the transmission," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "We have all witnessed the demonstration of Valorian military power. The question before us now is simple. How does humanity respond?" Chancellor Klaus Werner of the European Federation stood. "The answer should be equally simple. We negotiate. We accept their offer. Yes, it means losing our independence, but it means our species survives. We have seen what their weapons can do. We cannot fight that kind of power. Cannot or will not." The voice came from Ambassador Kenji Tanaka of the Pacific Alliance. He was a younger man, barely 40, but his eyes were hard. "Throughout human history, we have faced enemies with superior numbers and superior weapons. Sometimes we won. Sometimes we lost. But we always fought when our freedom was at stake. This is different," Werner insisted. "Those were human conflicts. This is an alien empire with technology centuries beyond ours. This isn't about courage or national pride. This is about mathematics. They have 300 ships that can destroy continents. We have orbital defense platforms with railguns. The equation is simple." Prime Minister Amara Okafor of the African Coalition stood slowly. She was tall and spoke with careful precision. "I suggest we hear from Admiral Chen before we make any decisions. She has been silent during this debate, and that concerns me. Admiral, what is the military assessment?" All eyes turned to where Admiral Chen sat with the other military advisors. She had been watching the debate with the same calm expression she had maintained since the aliens arrived. Now she stood and walked to the central podium. "The military assessment," she said slowly, "depends on what information you want assessed. If you want to know whether our current defenses can repel the Valorian fleet, the answer is no. Commander Werner is correct about that. Our orbital platforms and moon bases would be destroyed in minutes. She paused, letting that sink in. Several council members nodded, thinking she was agreeing with the surrender position. Then Chen continued. However, that is not the complete military assessment. That is only the assessment of our publicly known military capabilities. There are other capabilities that this council authorized 50 years ago, capabilities that have been developed in secret, precisely, for a scenario like this. The chamber erupted in confused voices. President Martinez banged her gavel for order. Admiral, please explain what you mean by secret capabilities. Chen activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. It showed the solar system with Earth at the center. In 1975, after the first successful Mars landing, a classified group of military strategists and scientists proposed a question. What if humanity encountered a hostile alien species with superior technology? How would we defend ourselves? She manipulated the display, and red dots began appearing throughout the solar system. The answer they developed was called the Endurance Protocol. The idea was simple. If aliens came to Earth, they would see our planet, our obvious military installations, our public technology. They would make assessments based on that visible information. But what if humanity had been building weapons in secret, far from Earth in places where no one would think to look? More red dots appeared. Dozens of them scattered through the asteroid belt, around Jupiter's moons deep in the Kuiper Belt beyond Neptune. For 5 decades, under the cover of scientific research and resource extraction, we have been building shipyards and weapons laboratories in the outer solar system. The mining stations were real, but they were also covers for construction facilities. The research bases were studying real science, but they were also developing weapons technology. Chancellor Werner's face had gone pale. You're saying we have a secret fleet? Not a fleet in the traditional sense, Chen replied. We have something different. Something designed specifically to fight enemies with superior technology. We learned from every war humans ever fought. We learned from the guerrilla fighters who defeated larger armies. We learned from the smaller nations that held off superpowers. We learned from every underdog victory in human history. She zoomed the display to show one of the red dots in detail. A structure appeared, massive and complex, hidden among the asteroids. This is Shipyard Gamma 7, one of 23 construction facilities scattered through the system. Each one has been building warships for decades. Not ships like the Valorians have. Not ships designed to look impressive or carry troops for occupation. Ships designed for one single purpose, to kill enemy vessels as efficiently as possible. The display showed a ship emerging from the construction dock. It was nothing like the Valorian vessels. Where the alien ships were smooth and beautiful, this ship was angular and brutal. Its hull was matte black, covered in stealth coating. No windows. No decorations. Just weapon systems, engines, and armor. It looked less like a ship and more like a flying gun. We call them Raptors, Chen said. Each one is crewed by 15 people and controlled by advanced combat AI. They're small compared to the Valorian battleships, only about 300 meters long. But they're fast, stealthy, and heavily armed. Each Raptor carries 12 railgun turrets, 6 nuclear-pumped laser arrays, 400 autonomous attack drones, and 8 nuclear missiles with yields up to 50 megatons. She changed the display to show more ship types. The Raptors are our fighters. We also have larger vessels. Destroyers carrying relativistic kill vehicles. Cruisers with electronic warfare systems designed to blind and confuse enemy sensors. Arsenal ships that are essentially flying weapons platforms with minimal crew. And the carriers which transport thousands of autonomous drones programmed with combat algorithms developed from every battle simulation we could run. Ambassador Tanaka leaned forward. How many ships are we talking about? 473, Chen replied. Most are Raptors, but we have enough heavy vessels to support them. And every single ship was designed with the assumption that we would be facing an enemy with better shields, better weapons, and better materials. So we didn't try to match their technology. We focused on what we could do better, which is, President Martinez asked, tactics, strategy, ruthlessness. Chen's voice was cold. The Valorians build ships to conquer and occupy. They build weapons to intimidate and destroy planetary defenses. But they've fought primitive species for 12,000 years. They've forgotten what it means to face an enemy that fights back with everything they have. She pulled up tactical displays showing weapon systems. Human weapons are crude by Valorian standards, but we've learned to make them devastatingly effective. Railguns fire solid slugs at incredible velocities. No fancy energy requirements, no complex systems to fail. Just kinetic energy. A slug of tungsten traveling at 1/10 the speed of light will punch through anything. Shields or no shields. It's basic physics. Another display appeared. Nuclear-pumped lasers use the energy from nuclear explosions to create X-ray laser beams. One-shot weapons, but devastating at close range. Our drones are expendable and controlled by AI that can react faster than any organic crew. Our stealth coating makes us hard to detect. Our ships are designed to operate independently, so destroying one doesn't affect the others. Prime Minister Okafor studied the displays carefully. You've had 50 years to prepare. But they have 12,000 years of technology. Surely their shields can stop kinetic weapons. Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons because that's what they use, Chen explained. They haven't faced mass drivers in thousands of years because most species they encounter don't use such primitive technology. But primitive doesn't mean ineffective. A rock moving fast enough will destroy anything. It's the same principle humans have used since we first threw spears at prey animals. She paused, then continued. But more than the weapons, it's the doctrine. The Valorians fight like conquerors. They show up with overwhelming force, intimidate their enemies into surrender, and occupy with minimal resistance. They're not prepared for an enemy that will sacrifice everything to win. They're not prepared for humans. Chancellor Werner found his voice. Even with all this, can we actually win? 400 ships against 300 Valorian battleships? Chen's expression didn't change. I can't guarantee victory, but I can guarantee that if they want Earth, they'll pay for it in blood. Every ship they lose will take years to replace. Every soldier they lose represents training and experience they can't quickly recover. And most importantly, will send a message to the rest of the Valorian Empire. Humanity is not prey. What if we lose? Someone asked from the back of the chamber. If we lose fighting, we lose everything, Chen admitted. But if we surrender without fighting, we lose everything anyway. At least if we fight, we have a chance, and we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel. President Martinez looked around the chamber at the faces of the council members. Fear was still there, but now there was something else. Hope, determination, pride. How long until the fleet is ready? 72 hours, Chen replied. The ships need to be fully activated and armed. Crews need to transfer from the stations where they've been training. We need to coordinate our attack patterns and establish communication protocols. But in 3 days, the fleet will be ready to deploy. And what do we do until then? Tanaka asked. Chen allowed herself a small smile. We do exactly what the Valorians expect. We act divided. We broadcast our debates and arguments for them to intercept. We send diplomatic messages asking for more time to consider their generous offer. We have public protests both for and against surrender. We make them think Earth is tearing itself apart trying to decide. While our fleet moves into position, Martinez said, understanding. Exactly. Let them think they've already won. Let them relax. Let them believe their own propaganda about primitive species and inevitable conquest. Meanwhile, every hour they wait is another hour we use to prepare. Another hour our crews train. Another hour our ships move closer. Chancellor Werner was shaking his head. This is insane. You're talking about going to war with an interstellar empire. Even if we win this battle, they'll send more ships. They'll send their full military. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today's problem is the fleet currently threatening Earth. And today we have the advantage because they don't know what's coming. They think they're hunting prey. They're about to learn they've walked into an ambush. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each council member. I won't lie to you. People are going to die. Ships will be destroyed. This will be the bloodiest battle in human history. But if we win, we establish humanity as a species that cannot be conquered. We show the galaxy that Earth is protected by something more dangerous than any alien empire. We're protected by humans. The vote took 20 minutes. It wasn't unanimous. 12 nations voted for immediate surrender, arguing that resistance was suicide. But 137 nations voted to fight. The majority was clear. President Martinez made the announcement to the world. Earth will not surrender. Earth will not kneel. If the Valorian Empire wants our world, they will have to take it from us, and we will make them pay for every meter of space, every moment of battle, every drop of human blood they spill. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters, extinction events and our own worst impulses. We will survive this too. As the council session ended and representatives returned to their nations, Admiral Chen returned to her command center. Commander Webb met her at the door. The activation codes have been sent. All stations are responding. The fleet is powering up. Chen nodded and walked to her office. She sat at her desk and pulled up the tactical displays showing the Valorian fleet still hanging near the moon, confident and relaxed. They had given Earth 30 days. They thought they had all the time in the world. They had 3 days before humanity reminded the galaxy why apex predators should never be underestimated. 3 days before the Valorians learned that their greatest mistake wasn't threatening Earth. Their greatest mistake was giving humans time to prepare. Admiral Chen began writing orders for the fleet commanders, each one a piece of the larger battle plan. Outside her window she could see stars. Somewhere out there, her ships were warming up their engines and arming their weapons. Somewhere out there, crews were running final checks and loading ammunition. Somewhere out there, humanity was preparing to show the Valorian Empire what happens when you threaten a species that has spent 10,000 years learning how to kill. The countdown had begun. On the flagship of the Valorian fleet, Ambassador General Thexnor stood in the command center surrounded by holographic displays showing data from Earth. His 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency, manipulating information streams and reading reports from his intelligence officers. Around him, the bridge crew worked quietly, monitoring the human planet and preparing for what they assumed would be a simple occupation. "Status report," Thexnor commanded, his deep voice carrying the confidence of someone who had done this 47 times before. Sub-Commander Vexral, his tactical officer, responded immediately. The humans continued to debate among themselves. Their communications channels are filled with arguments about surrender versus resistance. Several of their nations appear ready to accept our offer, while others speak of fighting. Their media broadcasts show protests and conflicts across their planet. As expected, Thexnor said, nodding his elongated head. Primitive species always react this way. They have no unity, no single voice. They argue and fight among themselves until reality becomes impossible to deny. Then they surrender. He pulled up a display showing Earth's military installations, orbital platforms with primitive railguns, moon bases with missile systems, a handful of warships that barely qualified as armed vessels by Valorian standards. Their defensive capabilities? Negligible, replied Weapons Master Cortex, his scales gleaming under the bridge lights. We have analyzed their technology extensively. They use chemical propulsion for their spacecraft, nuclear weapons for their most powerful bombs, kinetic weapons and basic energy systems for ship-to-ship combat. We encountered more advanced technology from the Kilrathi during their conquest, and that was 3,000 cycles ago. Thexnor manipulated the display, zooming in on one of Earth's warships. It was less than 200 meters long, powered by fusion engines armed with railguns and missiles. Primitive, almost laughably so. Their largest vessel carries weapons that might scratch our shield generators. Their fastest ships are slower than our cargo haulers. Their best armor wouldn't stop our point defense systems. Exactly, Ambassador General, Cortex agreed. A single one of our battleships could destroy their entire defensive network within an hour. Our full fleet could glass their planet in a day if we chose to do so. Which we will not, Thexnor reminded him firmly. Earth has resources we need. Its population can be integrated into the Empire. Its location is strategically valuable. Destruction is wasteful. We will accept their surrender, occupy peacefully, and begin the integration process. In a generation, humans will be loyal citizens of the Empire. Sub-Commander Vexral highlighted something on his display. Ambassador General, we have detected unusual energy signatures in the outer system. Near Jupiter and beyond, they appear to be research stations and mining operations powering up. Thexnor barely glanced at the information. Mining operations. The humans extract resources from asteroids and the outer planets. They likely increased power output to their facilities in response to our arrival. Panic reactions. Standard behavior. Should we investigate more closely? Vexral asked. Unnecessary, Thexnor replied. We have full sensor coverage of this system. If there were any military threats beyond Earth, we would have detected them immediately. The humans lack the technology to hide anything from our sensors. Focus your attention on Earth itself. That is where the decision will be made. The bridge crew returned to their duties, monitoring Earth's communications and military movements. Everything was proceeding exactly as Thexnor had seen dozens of times before. The humans were afraid, They were divided. They were arguing among themselves instead of presenting a unified response. It was all completely predictable. What Thexnor and his crew didn't understand was that humans had spent 50 years studying Valorian psychology. They had intercepted transmissions from conquered worlds. They had analyzed patterns of Valorian conquests. They had learned exactly what the Valorians expected to see, and they were giving them precisely that. The debates were real, but they had been decided within hours of the Valorian arrival. The protests were genuine, but they were allowed to continue specifically so the aliens would intercept them and feel confident. The chaos was controlled. The fear was weaponized. Everything the Valorians saw was designed to reinforce their assumptions about primitive, divided humanity. And while the Valorians watched Earth and congratulated themselves on another inevitable victory, they completely missed what was happening in the dark spaces of the outer solar system. In the Kuiper Belt, beyond Neptune, Shipyard Gamma 7 completed the activation of its final Raptor-class warship. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her vessel, designated Hunter 7-3. Around her, the crew moved through their stations with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years. Some had been born in the outer system and had never set foot on Earth. All of them understood what they were about to do. "All systems green," reported the weapons officer. "Railguns charged. Laser arrays ready. Drone bays loaded. Nuclear missiles armed." "Engine status?" Rodriguez asked. "Fusion drive at full capacity. We can maintain 0.8 G acceleration for 72 hours before we need to refuel. Stealth systems active. We're nearly invisible to standard sensors." Rodriguez nodded and opened a channel to the other ships in her squadron. 12 Raptors, each one a Predator designed for one purpose. "All hunters, this is 7-3. Sound off." One by one, the other captains reported in. "All ships ready. All crews prepared. All weapons armed." They were the tip of the spear, the first squadron that would engage the Valorian fleet. Behind them, dozens more squadrons were preparing. Destroyers with their relativistic kill vehicles, cruisers with electronic warfare systems, the massive arsenal ships with enough firepower to level a continent. "Orders from command," Rodriguez said, displaying Admiral Chen's tactical plan on their screens. "We jump to combat speed in 6 hours. Transit time to Earth orbit is 48 hours at maximum burn. We maintain stealth protocols until we're in attack range. Then we go weapons-free and show these aliens what human warships can do." She looked at the faces of her crew on the secondary displays. Young faces. Old faces. Every race and nation on Earth represented. They were human diversity concentrated into a single purpose: survival. "I won't lie to you. This is going to be the hardest fight of our lives. The Valorians have technology we can't match. They have experience conquering worlds. They have numbers and firepower." Rodriguez paused, then smiled grimly. "But they've never fought humans. They don't know what we're capable of. They don't understand what happens when you threaten the homeworld of a species that evolved by hunting everything else on their planet. They think their fancy shields and plasma weapons make them invincible. We're about to teach them a lesson in physics and violence." The crew was silent, focused. Rodriguez continued. "Our weapons are simple. Railguns throw chunks of metal really fast. Nuclear weapons make really big explosions. Drones are just small ships loaded with explosives and told to ram targets. Nothing fancy. Nothing complicated. Just pure, efficient killing tools. And that's all we need." She pulled up an image of a Valorian battleship. Beautiful, powerful, intimidating. "They build ships to inspire awe. We build ships to destroy enemies. They fight wars of conquest. We fight wars of survival. They expect us to be impressed by their fleet. We're going to show them our fleet, and it won't be impressive. It will be terrifying." Rodriguez closed the channel and turned to her helm officer. "Set course for Earth, maximum stealth. We're going hunting." All across the outer solar system, the same scene played out on hundreds of ships. Crews preparing, weapons powering up, engines igniting. The human fleet began its burn toward Earth, moving through the darkness of space like sharks sensing blood in the water. Back on the Valorian flagship, Thexnor received a diplomatic message from Earth. President Martinez requesting a meeting to discuss terms of surrender, asking for guarantees about treatment of the human population, seeking assurances about preserving human culture. Exactly what he expected. "Draft a response," he told his communications officer. "Be generous. Promise them cultural autonomy within reasonable limits. Guarantee fair treatment. Offer technology sharing and economic benefits. Make it sound appealing. Yes, Ambassador General, the officer replied, beginning to compose the message. Thexnor allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Another world about to join the Empire. Another species about to learn the benefits of Valorian rule. In 30 days, or perhaps even sooner, Earth would surrender. There would be a ceremony. Speeches about peace and cooperation. The Valorian flag would be raised over Earth's capitals. Another successful conquest to add to his record. Ambassador General, Bexral called out. The energy signatures in the outer system are increasing. Multiple contacts now. They're moving. Toward us. Thexnor frowned and pulled up the sensor data. The mining stations and research bases were indeed showing increased activity. And now they were registering as mobile contacts. Dozens of them. No, hundreds of them. All accelerating toward Earth. Analyze, he commanded. Kordax worked his console rapidly. Thermal signatures consistent with fusion drives. Acceleration rates higher than expected for cargo vessels. But the profiles don't match military craft. Too small. Wrong energy signatures. They could be evacuation ships, civilian vessels fleeing the outer system toward Earth. Possibly, Thexnor said, but something nagged at him. Increase sensor focus on those contacts. I want detailed scans. Ambassador General, they're still beyond effective scanning range, and their emissions are oddly muted, almost as if they're running with minimal power output except for engines. We can detect them, but we can't get detailed information yet. Thexnor stared at the display. Hundreds of contacts, all moving toward Earth, all accelerating at rates that suggested powerful engines, all maintaining unusual silence in terms of emissions. For the first time since arriving at Earth, he felt a small whisper of uncertainty. How long until they reach Earth orbit? He asked. At current acceleration, approximately 48 hours, Vexrel replied. Maintain monitoring, Thexnor ordered. If they deviate from civilian profiles or show any hostile intent, alert me immediately. But do not assume threat status. They are likely just frightened humans fleeing to their homeworld. Yes, Ambassador General. Thexnor returned to reviewing Earth's diplomatic messages, but part of his attention remained on the sensor data. Hundreds of human vessels moving through the dark. Probably nothing. Almost certainly civilian ships. The humans lacked the industrial capacity to build a fleet in secret. The Valorians had been monitoring Earth for years. They would have seen any major military construction. What the Valorians didn't know was that humans had been hiding their military construction for 5 decades, that every mining station had been building weapons, that every research base had been developing combat systems, that humans had learned from guerrilla warfare, from insurgencies, from every time in their history when a weaker force had defeated a stronger one, through deception and preparation. The Valorians had made their assessment based on what they could see. They had assumed that what they saw was everything. They had fallen into the oldest trap in military history, underestimating an enemy because they looked primitive. Humans looked primitive. Their technology was crude. Their ships were small. Their weapons were simple. Everything the Valorians could observe suggested an easy victory. What the Valorians couldn't observe was human determination, human adaptability, human willingness to prepare for the worst and fight with everything they had. The Valorians saw a divided species arguing among themselves. They didn't see the unified purpose beneath the chaos. In 48 hours, the Valorian Empire was about to receive an education in human warfare. They were about to learn that technological superiority means nothing if your enemy is willing to sacrifice everything. They were about to discover that the most dangerous weapon isn't the most advanced one. It's the one your enemy doesn't know about until it's too late. The human fleet continued its burn toward Earth, silent and deadly, moving through space like a blade sliding from its sheath. And on every ship, crews prepared for battle, knowing they were about to face an enemy with superior technology, but confident in their own advantages, surprise, tactics, and the absolute unwillingness to accept defeat. The Valorians had conquered 47 species. They had won hundreds of battles. They had 12,000 years of experience. But they had never fought humanity, and that was about to make all the difference. The Valorian fleet maintained its position near Earth's moon, waiting for what they believed would be humanity's inevitable surrender. Ambassador General Thexnor stood in his command center, reviewing the surrender ceremony protocols. In his experience, these events followed a predictable pattern. The defeated species would send representatives. There would be speeches about peace and cooperation. Documents would be signed. The occupation would begin smoothly. He barely paid attention to the sensor reports anymore. The hundreds of contacts from the outer system had continued their approach, but scans still showed them as civilian vessels, mining ships, cargo haulers, research vessels fleeing toward Earth for protection. Completely normal behavior for a frightened population. Ambassador General Subcommander Vexral called out, "The human contacts will reach Earth orbit in approximately 1 hour. Should we establish a perimeter to control their approach?" Thexnor waved a dismissive hand. "Unnecessary. Let them come. They pose no threat. Focus your attention on the surrender ceremony. I want everything perfect. This will be a message to the rest of the galaxy about Valorian mercy and wisdom." What Thexnor didn't know was that Admiral Chen was watching his fleet from her command center on Earth, analyzing their formation with the cold calculation of a predator studying prey. The Valorians had arranged themselves in a ceremonial pattern, their largest battleships in the front, smaller cruisers and destroyers spread out behind them. It was designed to look impressive. It was tactically stupid. "They're bunched up," Commander Webb observed. "Perfect targets for area weapons." "They're used to fighting primitives," Chen replied. "Species that see that fleet and surrender immediately. They've forgotten what a real space battle looks like. They've forgotten that formations designed for intimidation are vulnerable to concentrated fire." She opened a channel to the fleet. All 473 human warships were now in position, having completed their burn from the outer system. They hung in the darkness beyond the Valorian sensor range, their stealth coating making them nearly invisible against the black of space. "All ships, this is command. Final weapons check. Report status." One by one, the squadron leaders responded. "All weapons hot. All systems green. All crews ready." Chen allowed herself a moment of pride. These were her people, humans from every nation and background, united in a single purpose. They had trained for years for this moment. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could do. "Remember the plan," she said calmly. "We hit them fast and hard. No warning, no mercy. We don't give them time to react or adapt. Raptors go in first with railguns and drones. Destroyers follow with the relativistic kill vehicles. Cruisers jam their communications and sensors. Arsenal ships provide supporting fire. We turn their ceremonial formation into a killing field." She paused, then added quietly, "I know some of you are scared. That's good. Fear keeps you sharp. But remember, they came to our home. They threatened our families. They expected us to kneel. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity. Show them that we are not prey. We are the hunters, and today they are the hunted." Chen closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, then opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, begin attack run. Execute protocol endurance." The human fleet dropped stealth and activated their engines simultaneously. 473 warships appeared on Valorian sensors all at once, burning at maximum acceleration directly toward the alien formation. On the Valorian flagship, alarms screamed throughout the bridge. Vexral stared at his display in disbelief. "Contact! Multiple contacts. Hundreds of them. Military profiles." They're attacking." Thexnor spun to face the tactical display, his forearms moving frantically. "Impossible. Those were civilian vessels." "How? They weren't civilian," Cordax interrupted, his voice tight with sudden understanding. "They were warships running silent. We saw what we expected to see. We've been deceived. Battle stations." Thexnor roared. "All ships to combat formation. Raise shields. Charge weapons. Prepare to—" The first railgun slugs hit before the Valorians could complete their formation change. Captain Rodriguez's squadron of Raptors had opened fire at maximum range, their targeting computers calculating trajectories with inhuman precision. 12 ships firing 17 guns each. 204 tungsten slugs, each weighing 3 tons, each traveling at 1/10 the speed of light. The slugs covered the distance in seconds. The Valorian shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and slow-moving projectiles, were completely ineffective against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. Basic physics took over. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. At those speeds, the math was devastating. The first slug hit a Valorian cruiser amidships. The tungsten penetrated the shields like they weren't there, punched through the outer armor, continued through the interior, and exited the other side. The kinetic energy transfer created a shockwave that tore the ship apart from the inside. It broke into 3 pieces, atmosphere and debris fountaining from the breaches. The next 17 slugs hit the same ship, reducing it to an expanding cloud of wreckage. The Valorian crew never had time to scream. One moment they were preparing for a surrender ceremony. The next moment they were dead. More slugs found more targets. A destroyer took 4 hits and simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the kinetic impacts. A battleship's shields flickered and failed under the hammering, its armor cracking like an eggshell. In the first 10 seconds of combat, the Valorians lost 14 ships. Return fire, Thexnor screamed. Target those vessels. Destroy them. The Valorian plasma cannons swiveled and fired, blue-white beams lancing out toward the approaching human ships. But the Raptors were small, fast, and their pilots were good. They jinked and dodged, using attitude thrusters to throw off the Valorian targeting solutions. Some beams hit, burning through armor and destroying ships, but most missed, and the Raptors kept coming, kept firing. Launch drones, Rodriguez ordered. From the belly of each Raptor, hatches opened and attack drones poured out like angry hornets. Each drone was small, barely 3 meters long, armed with a single warhead and guided by combat AI. They moved in swarms, hundreds of them, overwhelming the Valorian point defense systems. The Valorians shot down dozens of drones, then dozens more, but there were too many. The drones crashed into shields, weakening them with each impact. They targeted weapon systems, sensor arrays, engine ports. Some carried conventional explosives, others carried nuclear warheads. They didn't care about survival. They were designed to die, taking their targets with them. A battleship disappeared in a nuclear fireball as 15 drones struck simultaneously, their warheads creating a fusion reaction that breached the reactor containment. Another ship went dark as drones destroyed its sensor suite, leaving it blind and helpless. The Valorian formation began to break apart as ships tried to maneuver away from the swarms. Then the destroyers arrived. 8 human vessels, each carrying a single relativistic kill vehicle. These weren't smart weapons. They were rocks, big chunks of iron and nickel, each weighing 100 tons attached to powerful engines. The destroyers had accelerated them to 15% light speed before releasing them. At those velocities, they couldn't be stopped. Point defense was useless. Shields were worthless. Armor was irrelevant. The laws of physics became the ultimate weapon. When a 100-ton mass hits a target at 15% of light speed, the kinetic energy release is measured in megatons. The first kill vehicle hit a Valorian battleship dead center. There was no explosion, no fireball, just instant vaporization. The battleship and everything in it became plasma, a brief star that flared and died in seconds. The shockwave from the impact damaged nearby ships, cracking hulls and shorting out systems. More kill vehicles found their targets. The Valorians tried to shoot them down, but hitting something that small moving that fast was nearly impossible. One kill vehicle missed its target and passed through the formation, its sheer velocity creating a shockwave that disabled a destroyer. Another hit a cruiser at an angle, shearing off half the ship and sending it spinning out of control. Electronic warfare now. Admiral Chen ordered from Earth. The cruisers activated their systems. They didn't have better technology than the Valorians, but they had studied Valorian communications and sensor frequencies for years. Now they broadcast white noise across those frequencies, jamming enemy communications and blinding their sensors. Suddenly, the Valorian fleet couldn't talk to each other, couldn't coordinate their defense, couldn't see the full picture of the battle. Ships collided as they maneuvered blindly. Friendly fire incidents occurred as crews fired at sensor ghosts. The organized fleet became a confused mob of individual vessels, each fighting alone against coordinated human attacks. The arsenal ships opened fire last. These were the largest human vessels, essentially flying weapons platforms with minimal crew. Each one carried nuclear missiles, hundreds of them, with yields up to 50 megatons. They ripple-fired, launching wave after wave of warheads toward the Valorian formation. The Valorians shot down many missiles. Their point defense lasers were excellent, but some got through. A dozen nuclear fireballs bloomed among the alien fleet. The electromagnetic pulses knocked out electronics. The radiation damaged sensors and crew. The kinetic shockwaves battered already damaged ships. On the Valorian flagship, Thexnor watched his fleet die. 40 ships destroyed in the first minutes. Dozens more damaged. The humans were everywhere, striking from multiple angles. using weapons he had dismissed as primitive but which were devastatingly effective. His beautiful, powerful fleet was being torn apart. "We need to retreat," Vexral said, his voice shaking. "Withdraw to reforming distance." "We can't fight like this." "No!" Vexnor roared. "We are the Valorian Empire. We do not retreat from primitives. All ships concentrate fire. Target their largest vessels." But there were no human capital ships. No large targets. Just small, fast attack ships that refused to stand still. Just swarms of drones. Just rocks moving at impossible speeds. The Valorians had prepared to fight a traditional space battle against a conventional fleet. They faced something else entirely. A human tactic from ancient Earth warfare. The swarm attack. No single human ship could match a Valorian battleship. But hundreds of small ships attacking from all directions, using primitive but effective weapons, could overwhelm superior technology through sheer numbers and aggression. Another Valorian battleship exploded as railgun fire found its reactor. A cruiser went dead in space, its power systems destroyed by drone attacks. A destroyer tried to run and took a kill vehicle in the engines, breaking its back. The Valorians were dying, and they didn't understand how it had happened so quickly. Rodriguez's Raptor took a plasma beam hit that vaporized the port side. Alarms screamed as atmosphere vented and crew compartments opened to space. "Seal breaches," she shouted. "Keep firing." "We're not done yet." Her ship was dying, but it still had weapons. She targeted a Valorian cruiser and fired everything she had. Railguns hammered the target. Drones swarmed it. A nuclear missile punched through weakened shields and detonated against the hull. The cruiser broke apart and Rodriguez allowed herself a grim smile. "Captain, we've lost engines," her officer reported. "Life support failing. We have maybe 10 minutes. Rodriguez nodded. "Set collision course with that battleship. Transfer crew to escape pods. We'll give them something to remember us by." The crew evacuated while Rodriguez stayed at the helm, guiding her broken ship toward the Valorian vessel. It tried to shoot her down, but she was already dead in space, too damaged to be worth their focused fire. They ignored her until it was too late. Hunter 7-3, or what was left of it, crashed into the battleship's command section at 300 meters per second. Both ships died in a bloom of fire and debris. Rodriguez's last thought was satisfaction. She had taken them with her. All across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships damaged beyond repair made final attacks. Crews that could have escaped chose to stay and fight, not because they were suicidal, but because every second they kept fighting was another second for other ships to strike. Every Valorian vessel they damaged or destroyed was one less threat to Earth. The Valorians had expected a brief battle followed by easy occupation. They got a meat grinder. They got humans fighting with the desperation of cornered animals and the cunning of apex predators. They got a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill, and had turned that knowledge into a science. Vexnor's flagship shuddered as railgun slugs hammered its shields. Systems failed. Fires broke out. Crew members died at their stations. The Ambassador General watched his bridge crew panic as they realized they were losing. Losing to humans. Losing to primitives with crude weapons and simple tactics. "All ships," he said, his voice broken. "Retreat, full burn. Get us out of Earth's gravity well." What was left of the Valorian fleet tried to disengage, but the humans weren't done. They pursued the fleeing ships, harrying them with drones and missiles, picking off stragglers. The withdrawal became a rout. 6 hours after it began, the Battle of Earth was over. The Valorian Grand Fleet, 347 ships that had conquered worlds and intimidated species, had been reduced to 93 battered survivors. They limped away from Earth, pursued by human ships until they were far enough out that Admiral Chen called off the attack. On Earth, humanity watched the debris field in orbit and realized what they had done. They had faced an interstellar empire with superior technology and won. Not through better weapons or advanced shields. Through tactics, through preparation, through the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Admiral Chen stood in her command center and allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. Human casualties had been heavy. 147 ships destroyed. Thousands of crew members dead. But Earth was safe. The Valorians had learned their lesson. She opened a channel to the remaining Valorian vessels. "This is Admiral Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You are being allowed to leave with your lives. Take this message back to your empire. Humanity is not yours to conquer. We are not impressed by your ships or intimidated by your weapons. If you want war, we will give you war. But if you want peace, we will negotiate as equals. The choice is yours." She closed the channel and looked at her remaining ships. They were damaged, battered, but victorious. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as a primitive species to be conquered, but as a force to be reckoned with. The Valorian Empire had thought they were the predators. They had learned in Blood and Fire that they had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened the homeworld of persistence hunters, pack animals, and tool users who had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain by being smarter, more adaptable, and far more ruthless than anything else they had ever faced. The battle was over. The war might be just beginning. But for today, humanity had proven something important. They were not prey. They were the hunters. And the galaxy would remember. Ambassador General Thexnor floated in his escape pod, watching through the small viewport as his flagship exploded behind him. The massive vessel that had carried him to 47 conquests was torn apart by human railgun fire, joining the debris field that now orbited Earth like a ring of broken dreams and shattered pride. His pod tumbled slowly through space, life support systems damaged, emergency beacon transmitting weakly. One of his forearms was broken. Burns covered his scaled skin. Blood leaked from wounds he couldn't properly treat with the pod's limited medical supplies. He was alive, but barely. Around him, other pods drifted, the survivors of the Valorian Grand Fleet, scattered and helpless. Ships that had dominated space battles for millennia had been reduced to wreckage by a species the Valorians had dismissed as primitive. Thexnor's mind struggled to process what had happened. How had it gone so wrong? A communication signal activated his pod's receiver. Human origin. Thexnor considered ignoring it, but what would be the point? He was defeated, captured, at the mercy of the species he had come to conquer. He accepted the transmission. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the small screen. She looked tired, Thexnor noted. Her uniform was rumpled, her eyes showing the strain of the battle. But there was no triumph in her expression. No gloating, just cold, hard determination. Ambassador General Thexnor, she said. I am Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the United Earth Defense Force. You and your surviving crew are being collected by our rescue ships. Your wounded will receive medical treatment. Your pods will be towed to a safe distance from Earth. You will not be harmed if you do not resist. Thexnor tried to speak but coughed instead, tasting blood. He tried again. You have won. I acknowledge Earth's victory. But this will not stand. The Valorian Empire will send more ships, larger fleets. You cannot stand against our full military might. Perhaps, Chen replied, her expression unchanged. That's a discussion for another day. Right now I have a message for you to deliver to your empire. I want you to understand it completely, so you can explain it properly to your leaders. She leaned forward slightly. You came to Earth expecting us to be impressed by your battleships. You showed us your weapons and your shields. You demonstrated your power and gave us 30 days to surrender. You thought we would be like the other species you conquered. Primitive, divided, easily intimidated. Chen's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. You made assumptions based on what you could see. You saw our basic technology and concluded we were no threat. You saw our public disagreements and thought we were weak. You saw our small ships and simple weapons and dismissed us as primitives. Every assumption was wrong. Thexnor said nothing. His golden eyes, usually so confident, now showed only pain and confusion. Chen continued. We're not warlike, Ambassador General. We don't conquer other species. We don't build empires. For the most part, we prefer peace. But we're also not naive. We know the galaxy is dangerous. We know there are species like yours out there, ready to take what they want by force. So we prepared. She pulled up tactical displays showing the human fleet. For 50 years, we built weapons in secret. We developed tactics specifically designed to fight enemies with superior technology. We studied every battle in our history, learned from every victory and defeat. We turned our paranoia into preparation, our fear into readiness. Your weapons are primitive, Thexnor managed to say. You won through luck and surprise. Once we adapt to your tactics, you'll lose again, Chen interrupted. Because you still don't understand what you face today. Those primitive weapons were specifically chosen to counter your advantages. You have energy shields, so we used kinetic weapons that shields can't stop. You have advanced sensors, so we used stealth and electronic warfare. You have large, powerful ships, so we built small, fast ones that swarm and overwhelm. She paused to let that sink in. We didn't try to match your technology. We couldn't. Instead, we adapted. We used what works. A rock moving fast enough will destroy anything, no matter how advanced it is. A nuclear explosion doesn't care about your shields. A swarm of drones can overwhelm the best point defense. These are lessons humanity learned fighting each other for 10,000 years. Thexnor's scales had gone pale. Chen's words were cutting deeper than any weapon. She was explaining not just how the Valorians had lost, but why they had never had a chance. "Let me tell you about humanity, Ambassador General," Chen said, her voice taking on an almost educational tone. "We're persistence predators. Do you know what that means? On our world, we didn't have the strongest jaws or the sharpest claws. We couldn't run as fast as our prey, so we developed a different hunting strategy. We chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We tracked animals for days, never letting them rest, never giving up until they were too tired to run anymore. Then we killed them." She let that image settle. "We're pack hunters. We work together. We coordinate. We share information and adapt our tactics in real time. When you attacked, you weren't fighting individual ships. You were fighting a coordinated organism with hundreds of parts all working toward a single goal, your destruction. And most importantly," Chen continued, "we're tool users. We turn everything into weapons. We took wolves, the apex predators of our world, and bred them into dogs that protect our children. We took atoms, the building blocks of matter, and split them to make bombs. We took rocks and learned to throw them fast enough to punch through armor. Everything we touch becomes a weapon if we need it to be." Thexnor felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. True fear. Not fear of death, but fear of understanding. Chen was revealing a truth about humanity that was terrifying in its implications. "You came here thinking you were the predators," Chen said softly. "You thought we were prey to be hunted and captured. But you made a critical mistake. You judged us by your own standards, by the species you had conquered before. You didn't realize what we actually are." She leaned even closer to the camera, her eyes intense. "We're the species that walked out of Africa with nothing but sharp rocks and burning sticks and conquered an entire planet. We're the species that nearly drove ourselves to extinction multiple times and somehow survived. We're the species that built nuclear weapons powerful enough to destroy our world, then had the discipline not to use them. We're the species that looked at the vacuum of space and said, 'That looks challenging,' and went there anyway. We're not trapped in this galaxy with you, Ambassador General," Chen said. And now there was something almost like pity in her voice. "You're trapped here with us. Every species that threatens us will learn what you learned today. Every empire that tries to conquer Earth will face what you faced. And they'll lose just like you lost because they'll make the same mistake." "What mistake?" Thexnor whispered, though he already knew the answer. "They'll assume that restraint means weakness," Chen replied. "They'll think that because we prefer peace, we're not prepared for war. They'll see our simple weapons and think we're primitive, not understanding that we chose simplicity because it works. They'll look at our divided governments and our arguments and our chaos, and they won't see the unity beneath it all." She pulled up an image on the screen. Earth, blue and beautiful, hanging in space, scarred now by the debris of battle, but intact, alive, protected. "This is our world, Ambassador General. This is where we evolved, where we grew, where we learned to survive against predators and disease and our own violent nature. We have problems. We fight among ourselves. We make mistakes. But when someone from outside threatens our home, all that division disappears. We become one species with one purpose." Chen's expression hardened again. "You're going to take a message to the Valorian Empire. You're going to tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that Earth is not theirs to conquer. You're going to make them understand that any fleet they send will face the same fate as yours. And you're going to tell them that humanity offers a choice." "What choice?" Thexnor asked. "Peace or war," Chen said simply. "We don't want to fight. We're willing to negotiate. We're open to trade, cultural exchange, diplomatic relations. We're even willing to help the Valorian Empire deal with threats from other species. But we negotiate as equals, not as subjects. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable. Our freedom is non-negotiable. Respect that and we can be friends. Threaten it, and we will destroy every ship you send." She stood up from her chair. "You have ships coming to collect you. They're Valorian vessels that fled the battle. We're allowing them to approach and retrieve your pods. We could destroy them easily, but we're choosing not to. That's mercy, Ambassador General, not weakness. Remember the difference." Thexnor watched as Chen prepared to end the transmission. He had to ask one more question, the one that had been burning in his mind since the battle turned against them. "How?" How did you prepare all this in secret? We monitored your communications. We observed your planet for years. How did we miss your fleet? Chen smiled, and it was not a warm expression. Because you looked at Earth and saw only Earth. You didn't think about the rest of the solar system. You didn't consider that we might build facilities on asteroids, moons, distant planets. You assumed that if we had a military, it would be obvious and visible. You forgot that humans are very, very good at hiding things when we want to. But more than that, she added, you looked at us through the lens of your own experience. You had conquered 47 species. You had a pattern. Show up with overwhelming force. Intimidate the natives. Accept their surrender. Move on to the next world. It worked every time, so you assumed it would work again. You forgot the first rule of warfare. Never assume your enemy will act the way you expect. She prepared to close the channel, then paused. One more thing, Ambassador General. Tell your empire about our casualties. Tell them we lost 147 ships. Tell them thousands of humans died today. Make sure they understand that we paid a heavy price for this victory. Why? Thexnor asked, confused. Why would you want us to know your losses? Because I want them to understand what those deaths mean, Chen replied. Every human who died today knew the risks. They knew they might not survive. They chose to fight anyway because they believed Earth was worth protecting. That's what your empire is facing, not just weapons or tactics or technology. You're facing a species that values freedom enough to die for it. The transmission ended. Thexnor's pod continued to drift through space, surrounded by debris from both fleets. Human rescue ships were collecting Valorian survivors, providing medical aid, towing damaged pods to safety. It was efficient, professional, almost kind. But Thexnor understood the message beneath the mercy. Humanity could kill them all, but chose not to. They were demonstrating strength through restraint. Hours later, Valorian ships arrived and began collecting their people. Thexnor was transferred to a medical bay where his wounds were treated. Around him, other survivors told stories of the battle, ships destroyed in seconds, weapons that couldn't be stopped, humans who fought with suicidal bravery. The crew was traumatized, their confidence shattered. As the ships began the long journey back to Valorian space, Thexnor sat in his quarters and prepared his report. He would tell the High Command everything. The secret human fleet, the unexpected tactics, the devastating effectiveness of primitive weapons, the coordination and discipline of human forces, the absolute refusal to surrender even when ships were dying. But most importantly, he would deliver Admiral Chen's message. He would explain that Earth was protected not by superior technology, but by something more dangerous, a species that had evolved to survive against impossible odds, that had learned to turn anything into a weapon, that fought with the combined intelligence of pack hunters and the determination of persistence predators. The Valorian Empire would have to make a choice. They could accept humanity's offer of peaceful coexistence. They could negotiate trade agreements and diplomatic relations. They could benefit from human innovation and creativity, or they could send more fleets. They could try again to conquer Earth, and they would lose. The humans had proven they could fight, had proven they would fight, had proven that any species that threatened their home would pay a terrible price. Thexnor looked out the viewport at the stars and realized something that chilled him to his core. The galaxy had changed today. Humanity had announced itself not as a primitive species to be absorbed into greater civilizations, but as a power in its own right. Other species would hear about this battle. They would learn that Earth could not be easily conquered. Some would respect that. Some would fear it. Some would want to test it themselves. The Valorian Empire had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. They had found something else entirely. They had found humans, and the galaxy would never be the same. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen stood at a memorial service for the fallen crew members. Thousands had died defending their world. Their names would be remembered. Their sacrifice would be honored. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. More aliens would come. Some would be friendly. Others would be hostile. Humanity had proven it could fight and win, but that didn't mean the battles were over. If anything, they were just beginning, but humanity was ready. They had ships. They had weapons. They had tactics and strategies developed over thousands of years of warfare. Most importantly, they had the will to survive, the intelligence to adapt, and the courage to face whatever came next. Admiral Chen looked up at the stars and smiled grimly. "Let them come. Let the galaxy see what humanity was capable of. Let them understand that Earth was not a prize to be won or a resource to be exploited. It was home, and humans would protect their home with everything they had. The Valorian Empire had thought they would be impressed by alien battleships. Instead, humanity had shown them something far more impressive: the determination of a species that refused to kneel, the ingenuity of tool users who could turn anything into a weapon, and the terrifying efficiency of predators who had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of survival. The message had been sent. The warning had been delivered. Now the galaxy would decide how to respond. But whatever came next, humanity would be ready. They had proven that when you corner a persistence predator, when you threaten a pack hunter, when you challenge a species that has climbed to the top of its food chain through intelligence and adaptability, you don't get submission, you get war. And humanity, it turned out, was very, very good at war.